What's up, everybody? It is Wednesday, and we are back at you with barely qualified picks. I am Uncle Denny. I've got my man Nate here, and we have got a lot to talk about. It is NCAA National Championships Week, the Natty. We're going to talk a little bit about last week's semifinal games. Still hurts a little bit, but we got to talk about the Ducks and what happened against Indiana in the Peach Bowl. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the national championship itself. We're going to talk a little bit about a couple of subjects in college football that are related to the playoff as we look ahead to next year. And then we're going to talk NFL. What happened last week in the wild card round? Two real upsets, one sort of upset with Buffalo, and a big divisional round this week. A lot to get to. Nate, thank you for being here.
Hey, excited to be here. We've got a absolutely full slate, so let's get after it.
Let's do it. Let's start with Miami and Ole Miss. I got to say, in many ways, it was Miami's best game of the year. Ole Miss doesn't have the best defense, but Miami was impressive on both offense and defense. The only thing that I really struggled with Miami was their 10 penalties for 74 yards. And as we're going to talk about against Indiana, you've got to play a completely clean game. They didn't do that, but this is also the same Miami team that had no penalties whatsoever against Ohio State. So they can play a clean game. And even though they didn't here, they got the win to earn this spot in the national championship game. What did you make of Miami against Ole Miss?
It is so hard not to let my Mario crystal ball, or I should say anti-Mario crystal ball bias come into play here. But they showed up to play late, and that's ultimately what ended up changing the game, right? I don't think they looked particularly great on that offensive side of the football until late in the game. We knew Ole Miss's defense was at some point going to crack. That had been their Achilles heel, whether Lane Kiffin or not, throughout the entire year. So that's just ultimately what it came down to. At that end of the game, they made more plays on offense. Both defenses were not playing great at that point, and it was just one play here or there that made the difference. When you're talking about the penalties, certainly can't have that against Indiana, but against a team that's not as defensively strong as Ole Miss is, you can kind of get away with them. And some of those penalties, I would chalk them up to being more emotional than I would be as a function of the process or the what do you want to call it, like the cadence of the offense or the defense. They weren't. Just very emotional, right? And that's what you're going to get in these kind of games. But those emotional penalties are going to absolutely kill you against Indiana. So tip of the cap to Chamblee and to Ole Miss. They made an absolute Cinderella story, if you will, out of a situation that was really poor with Lane Kiffin leaving. And then shout out to Miami. You got to tip the cap regardless of how I feel about them personally. They are in the national championship game. And at this point, there's no flukes.
Yeah, watching Miami last week was watching Mark Fletcher for the most part for me. He had 22 carries for 133 yards, didn't get in the end zone, but he kept Miami in that game and put them in a position to, as you pointed out, explode down the stretch and ultimately win the game. And a lot of that goes to Carson Beck, but ultimately Mark Fletcher kept them in that game and allowed them to overcome a lot of those penalties. I don't think that's going to be the case against Indiana because Indiana's run defense is just so stout. You saw it against Ole Miss all day long, and it really wasn't anything different than what you saw against Georgia, where, when they wanted to, they ran the ball well. Gunnar Stockton didn't run the ball as well, but then, of course, Trinidad Chamblee is a different quarterback, and, credit to Miami's defensive line. They were getting home. That said, I think, again, it's going to be very different against Indiana. And we saw, I wouldn't even say the best of Indiana, but we saw what Indiana can do against Oregon last week in the Peach Bowl, winning 56-22. And it really wasn't that close. It was really more like a 56-15 type game. And I hate to say this, but a lot of the things that we feared would happen in this game happened, starting with Dante Moore's interception on the very first play.
That's exactly what we talked about. His interceptions are bad. They just are. And I love Dante. I think he's got an incredible amount of talent. I don't have any knocks on him. But he just throws bad interceptions. You're looking at it, and when they show that all 22 view from behind, you're like, what is he looking at when he made that throw? And so it makes you wonder. Again, Indiana, I think, had an excellent game script right off the rip. I know there's a lot of allegations about cheating and this, that, and the other, but their offense is a well-oiled machine. And I don't. This sounds so crazy, and like we were talking about last week, they're accountants. They just come in, they do their business, and they execute, and then they go home. And that's exactly what they did. The amount of times, I believe they converted 5 or 6 third and longs and their receivers made contested catches, big catches the entire game. And that made a huge difference. The Ducks weren't struggling to get them to third down. They were struggling to get off the field on third down. And then when your offense is giving the ball right back to the defense, your defense is going to get worn on. And then that's what we saw big time in the second half is Indiana really pull it away. We knew the game was over before halftime, but if there was any hope of a big comeback, it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you about that. This is the second year in a row that the Ducks have been run out of the building in the first half. Obviously, last year against Ohio State as the number 1 seed in the Rose Bowl. I mean, it sucks to lose like this. But then I was complaining about this exact topic to one of my Ohio State buddies, and he said, "Oh, we wrote the script for embarrassing losses." He was like, "Doesn't mean you can't win the big one down the road, but it does sting." And that was a good sanity check for me because it's true. This doesn't mean that Dan Lanning can't win a national championship. And we are kind of taking one baby step closer each year from losing in the Pac-12 championship to losing in the first game that we played to winning a game and then losing. And yet it still stings just to lose that way and feel so close, yet so far away from a team like Indiana.
Yeah, I think what hurts the most is not the loss. It is the reputation and how the Ducks have lost. Because you're not just, losing a tight game and, man, you were so close. This wasn't the Ducks against Auburn where they walk off the field and you get some respect from the SEC. This was, wow, these guys might have been frauds. They only had to play James Madison and Texas Tech, and those were teams that we weren't totally convinced on in the first place. And again, you just get ran out of the building on the national stage. So next year when it comes time for the committee, say Oregon has a slightly down year. Now you've got 2 losses. What's the committee going to say? Are they going to give you the Notre Dame treatment? Well, we don't really know how good you actually are. Or are they going to actually get in and have an opportunity to kind of make a play? That's the tough part, is the reputation side of things that now precedes Oregon. Because no matter what we say and no matter what those baby steps are forward, Ducks can't win the big game will always be the narrative until they win the big game. They've won plenty of big games.
100%.
Just not the game.
And this is the thing for me. I still believe, even after watching the collapse that happened in Georgia, that if the Ducks were playing Miami this week, the Ducks would beat Miami. I think the defense would get the better of Carson Beck. I think they would be able to control the running game. And I think that would give Dante Moore enough opportunities, even with a decimated backfield, to get it done. So transitive property, fake transitive property, because Oregon hasn't actually played Miami. But it is so hard for me to see how Miami is going to hang with Indiana in this game. If you just look at it as one individual game, because I want to talk about the historical precedent that this can set. First 16-0 team. Indiana came into this season as the losingest program in college football history. I want to talk about all that. But if you just look at this one game, before the Peach Bowl was played, Vegas was projecting that if Oregon won, it would be Miami -3 over Oregon, which I thought was silly. They projected if Indiana won, it was going to be Indiana -3.5. And then Indiana beat Oregon so badly, the spread actually opened at 7.5 with that very important half-point hook. And within an hour, it was 8.5 across every book in America. And It sat there, and I will bet you it gets to 9.5 by kickoff. I bet there's going to be a late flood of money in on Indiana, and it's going to end up being a double-digit spread, which is kind of crazy. What it makes me think about is the last time Miami was in a national championship game that I can remember against Maurice Claret and the Ohio State Buckeyes, who were also a double-digit underdog in that game. Got a little bit of help from the refs. Got help to win the game, but they would have covered no matter what. And I look at Miami and I'm like, could they really? Could they? That's a lot of points. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think this is going to be another game where Indiana pours it on. I think it's going to be 90% Indiana fans, which is crazy that Miami has earned the right to play for a national title in its own building, and they're going to have like 10% of the fans in the house. I promise you that. It's going to be a wash in crimson.
That's crazy. Man, It's just hard to think that Indiana can keep doing it, right? But we've seen national championship teams that keep doing it. Like, there's no way they can beat this team by 30, this team by 30, and they continue to show up and do that. I thought the Ducks did a great job of getting pressure on Mendoza early. They got a few sacks. Third down, there was the strip sack where you think maybe that ball bounces the other way. The Ducks recover, get something back. Man, just they have to be able to rattle Mendoza, but he doesn't seem rattled. Carson Beck sometimes can pull what Justin Herbert did this last weekend. We can talk about that. Just start seeing ghosts a little bit. And I think that's ultimately, it's just a quarterback advantage at this point. I don't think Indiana's defense is that much better than Miami's. I think they're pretty on par, and I think Miami proved that. Again, late in the game, things got sketchy, but we also talked about how Chambly is just a different quarterback, and he was going to make some plays to extend drives. Going to wrap this all up here. I don't see how Indiana blows this team out, but it's likely to happen. I don't know how those two things can exist at the same time. I just don't want to believe that they can keep doing it to people, but they are just so efficient, and we talked about it. They don't make mistakes, and they keep drives going with those big third downs. And you've got Himby and you've got Black, and they're just running straight downhill looking for contact. Can Miami deal with that? We'll find out.
We will. And they have not seen a team like Indiana all year long.
Apparently nobody has. Apparently Old Dominion might be the second best team in the country.
State. Miami played Ohio State really tough, but they didn't score a whole lot on offense until late in that game. It's going to have to be a different game script against Indiana. I was heavy on Indiana against Oregon. That paid off. I'm going to be heavy again. I've already pushed the chips in on Indiana minus 7.5. I think it's going to be. I think it is going to be history. That's the other side of this.
Can I ask a hypothetical here? And we're going to go back to the regular season here. Had Indiana lost to Penn State, right? And they won on a heartbreaking buzzer beater back of the end zone. Maybe it was a catch, maybe it wasn't. Had they have lost that game, do we think Indiana is still in the national title today?
I think they are, yeah. And
I think that still that good, that solid?
Stronger. I think it's amazing that they didn't lose a game, and that you don't have to go through the regular season without losing a game. And, we've seen it so many times that oftentimes a team's on a long run and they do lose a game, and that's a good reset moment, and they can lock back in.
But would it have changed their belief? Like deep down, Mendoza, who's starting his career, and I lose another big game. And he didn't really play any big games at Cal. There was no big games to play. But if in that first quote-unquote big game against Penn State and you can't win that one, does that change how the team sees themselves? Because right now they see themselves as gods. And they have ultimate belief. Is that belief dented? Is that belief damaged, therefore impacting their ability to execute? Again, crazy hypothetical.
Well, and I will say that at that point, they had gone into Iowa and they had beaten Iowa 2015 in a real rock fight. They had gone into Eugene. They beat Oregon 30-20. Illinois should never have been number 9 in the country, but they were number 9 when Indiana beat them 63-10. So I think even if they had lost that game against Penn State, they had done so many great things. And look, you know who I'm really putting my vote of confidence in saying this? It's Curt Cignetti. That Curt Cignetti would have used that as fuel for fire. And because he didn't have that, he found other fuel for the fire. But I just don't think anybody's fire burns as hot and as bright as Indiana's fire. And I think that's going to come out on Monday. I think it's going to be a steamroll. And I do think this is going to go down as one of the 5 greatest seasons in college football history. It's exciting that we're here for it.
Wow.
All right. Now, Nate, I was talking to you about this before the show. One of the things that really stood out to me was the complete lack of Guardian caps in the college football playoff. I don't think I saw a single one. So I went to Gemini and I asked my buddy Jerry Gemini if, they're outlawed or, is there any conference-based constraint on them? No, they're all, obviously fully permitted as you'd expect. And we see them in the NFL. You see them from a few key players, not everybody, right? I think when I think of the Rams, I know they have a couple of offensive linemen that wear one, and Kyron Williams wears one. The Packers, obviously they didn't beat the Bears, but Romeo Doubs had a huge game and he wears one. But we just see none of it at the college level. And I was thinking back to the season I don't think in all the Oregon Ducks games I watched that I saw one. Why do you think that is? It seems like this is a safety and equipment, advantage that it may look a little silly, but it's not so silly that there aren't NFL players who are saying my brain is more important than how this might look. And the other side of it is the more players that wear them, the less silly it looks. Why are we having such a hard time getting college athletes to wear these?
Yeah, I had to sit and think on this one for a while because when I was finishing up my college career, at that time, guardian caps were just a part of practice, right? So all the offensive linemen, your linebackers, guys who have a lot of physical contact within and during practice, they have them on. A few guys, we had a tight end who would wear one during a game, but the biggest issue, I think, and it's not even an issue, it's just the kids don't want to wear it. Number one, I don't think they quite understand the implications of what a concussion does to your brain long term.
Right.
I'm a kid, right? Everyone talks about, oh, you're getting older, you're going to fall apart. That same kind of concept applies to the brain. Kids just don't get it. And I think the second part is building a brand as a football player is hard, right? You're one of 22, you're not one of five. You then have to put a helmet on. People can't see your face the entire time unless you're the quarterback. And then you want to throw a guardian cap on top of that.
You'd be noticeable then.
Right, but your swag just went from way up here to way down here. Like you can't drip that out, right? You can't be wearing a Cuban link and then having a guardian cap on. It's just not going to fit. And so, although these kids are starting to get paid more money, it's not quite the same as protecting your career in the NFL. And a lot of these guys, believe it or not, they don't really believe that they're going to play at the next level. A good amount of them do, but some guys are just like, for what? I'm going to be done. I'm going to be done in a couple years anyways. And so I think that, again, the bigger issue is not the availability. It's not that, people don't want to protect themselves. I just think that they don't really care.
Well, and that's a great point. And obviously, you and I have talked about this in past shows. Humans and organizations both are incentive-driven creatures. And so, if you haven't given them a reason to care, then why would they? And that kind of leads me to my next question, which is, what could we do to help them care? You think about NIL and you think about the dollars that programs can put in players' wallets at this point. There are some limitations around that. Is there a world where we could create a partnership between the NCAA, Guardian Caps, and then companies out in the world that want to sponsor, players wearing Guardian Caps, and then have that money, accepted from the general salary cap or whatever will come to be in college football so that, players can get money. Hey, that's a great incentive. You're going to get paid to wear this thing. And the schools can obviously get a benefit of they can give their players more without having to dip into their own pockets. And then, from a societal safety standpoint, we're hopefully creating some momentum behind it. And eventually you don't have to pay everybody to do it, but it feels like, to your point, there's a dissonance here. People don't really see the safety risk necessarily. And, without that and without any compensation, why would they wear them? But it feels like something we can solve.
Yeah, and I think there's another layer here we're not thinking about. It's helmet technology, right? What Josh Allen wears, what Pat wears, what Tua wears, that 3D printing custom helmet one-to-one. I would rather get a NIL deal with that helmet company that's going to make one perfect to my head, specific to my position, which I'd assume they're getting tons of money for research and development to build that out. But I think helmet technology just has to catch up a little bit.
Can you talk about that though? Because I don't think, even I don't really have that much knowledge and insight into how helmet technology has changed over, call it, the last 20 years. Obviously I can think back to the 70s and 80s and the helmets were all big and bulky with the big face masks, but just in your time playing football from high school days to college days to now, as a football observer and analyst, what has happened with football tech? And talk a little bit about the 3D printing, because I don't think I know much about that. I'm sure a lot of people watching don't really understand what's going on there.
Yeah, so helmet technology, I'll say from a broader standpoint, is all about dispersion of impact, right? You think about the pounds of pressure per square inch when somebody is getting hit, where is most of that pressure going? And you don't want it going inwards to the head, right? You think about a bicycle helmet, the thing falls apart when you crash because it's dispersing all of the energy,
Right.
right? So that's what helmets are ultimately trying to do, is find a way to most effectively disperse the energy. Now, it's really difficult when the head hits the ground, right? When your head hits the ground doesn't move. Turf doesn't move, grass doesn't move. There's no give. It's earth, right? But when you hit somebody's head or neck area, as long as there's no compression of the spine, your neck has give, right, when it connects. And that's why you'll see guys, they'll have head-to-head contact, and you think, oh my gosh, this guy's going to be out for his entire life. And he gets up like nothing ever happened because there's more give. Again, so helmet technology is about dispersing that energy that's collected during that collision. What the 3D printed helmets do is just they take it another layer deeper. And I don't know a ton here either, but what I understand is the carriage for the head itself gets customized to the player for the high impact areas that they typically receive. So Tua's probably going to have a little bit more in the back of his helmet than Josh Allen is, like things like that, right? They design that around the player's head so that the fit is 1-to-1 instead of the generic helmet that everybody gets. And it's okay, small, medium, large. This is the one that fits close enough. Let me get my chin strap, right? It's going on like a glove, essentially. And then all the other technologies inside of it that help disperse the energy. Again, I don't know a ton about what Tua has, but from what he was talking about in his press conference, the studies were showing that it performs better or the same than Guardian caps in most situations.
Interesting.
And so if helmet technology catches up, then I think you would see the NCAA or teams develop the helmet technology for game helmets. Maybe they're painted helmets specifically, and then Guardian caps just at practice. Something or the other to save on expenses, right? Because it's going to be expensive.
I was going to say, I mean, it is going to be expensive, but with all the money that's in this,
Protect
now
the product.
sport, we could talk about college being a college sport, but, as we're going to get into with our last college subject, college players aren't student athletes anymore. They're employees. And this is a professional sport now. There's so much money in it. Everybody's getting paid. It gets bigger every year. They're going to expand this playoff. It's funny. Earlier in the year, we talked about they really should expand this playoff, but the NCAA is so slow. They made some changes last year, but now it looks like they might expand to 16 teams because why? Everybody wants more money. That said, they got to make sure that the players are playing with the best technology. There's no excuse for it not to be that way. Even if you create a pool of money on the top line before everybody gets paid, it's a safety fund that pays for, all of the schools that participate should be getting their helmets subsidized. You would think that if you are buying on that scale, you can work with the company to get the cost down to where it makes sense for everybody. It just, we've got to make sure that we protect this game for the future. And I think, credit to the NFL, credit to all the different levels of football. We've made a lot of progress, but this is one that, I would love to see more progress on. But thank you for the education. It makes more sense to me why we don't necessarily see it with our eyes, but there is improvement that is outside of just the Guardian caps themselves.
Absolutely.
All right, now I want to talk to you about this last piece because when we spoke last, we were talking about DeMond Williams and what was going to happen with him and the University of Washington, potentially being lured away by Lane Kiffin. Ultimately, he does an about face. He's coming back to Washington. He's going to honor his agreement.
Awkward.
Awkward, very awkward, but he's going to hug it out, and hopefully it will work out for UW. Now, one of the things that I've been thinking about is it's interesting how far we've come on the transfer front. When you think about, this year, and at least for the foreseeable future, until something changes, every year is going to be a free-for-all. Every year, most everybody can declare themselves a free agent because there are very, very, very few multi-year deals. Like you look at Duke's Darian Mensah, they signed him to a 2-year deal when they brought him over from Tulane. But most guys are on 1-year deals because they want the flexibility to get a better deal every year. I think for a lot of these schools, they're scared to death about locking players up to multi-year deals because of the risk of injury, and they're not getting necessarily the same, profit sharing and things that the NFL are getting, and they have much bigger rosters. So how are they going to manage all of that? But it can't sustain like this. And when I think back to the way that it used to be, where you could transfer in one of two scenarios. You could transfer as a graduate with 1 year left to play and you could play right away, or you could transfer as an undergraduate and you had to sit out a year. Well, that isn't that different from like how all of Europe works if you're trying to hire somebody from a company where they're already employed. And frankly, many levels of corporate America as well, where you're trying to hire away an executive or a talented engineer from a rival company and they've got a non-compete agreement. And so what do? You put them on garden leave. The new company, you want to hire that person, you got to pay them for 6 months or sometimes 12 months. And then while they're on the sidelines, they're collecting that check. And as soon as that time period's up, they get to get in the game for you. Do we need to come back to some sort of 1 year transfer rule for players to make it more of a serious thing and kind of create a little bit more stability around these programs and the player movement that we're seeing?
I Man, that's hard because now you're talking about, because this is technically still amateur sports and kids' school, right? I have the right to choose what
Kind of,
school
but
I
it's
go to.
not.
Right, it's not, but I still have the right to choose what school I go to. Yeah, but when you talk about the eligibility of the sport, again, if a coach can, then why can't a player? I see no
And in the
problem.
company, like
Yeah,
you can choose where you want to go, but you might have non-compete agreements that say you got to wait a little bit before you go there. Versus
yeah.
other companies where it's like you just go there tomorrow. You could quit your job and go there tomorrow. And maybe with these transfer rules, it would be like it used to be. Hey, you want to transfer to an FCS school, or if you're in a Power Four and you want to transfer to a Group of Six, you don't have to sit out. But if you're transferring up, you got to sit out here.
Yeah, I just have such a hard time with that one. I do agree that there has to be some sort of penalty, and maybe it's half of the season. But there I really can't think of another resolution other than enforcement of contracts and relating it to dollars paid to years of contract. Any penny taken over $500,000 means minimum 200 or minimum 2 year contract and things like that, so that there is at least a level of commitment tied to the money. Because then otherwise, you're just paying for a player's development, right? If a guy takes, however many, like Nebraska, for example, with Dylan Raiola, he's obviously frustrated there. Nebraska has paid to develop him in whatever, you know, capacity you want to say he'd been developed
Yeah,
there.
he's a
And he's
star.
just gonna
He did a great job.
right, but he's gonna ditch that. He's got starter experience and come to it or go to a different school, whether that's Oregon again or not. I don't really know now that Dante's coming back. But the thing is like you just I honestly don't have the answer other than contracts should be enforceable based on their value.
So let me circle back to the point on multi-year contracts. I agree with that, and maybe in practice this works because when you think about it, if we did start to see an increase in multi-year contracts, they're going to go to the most talented players, right? The players you're not going to have every player on a 110-man roster on a multi-year contract. You're going to have the vast majority of them on 1 year contracts, and maybe we're fine with a world where there's turnover in the secondary ranks of a roster, right? Maybe we're fine in a world where the star players are largely staying put. So coaches can sign a player and have some confidence that they're going to have them for a couple of years, maybe 3 years in this case. Like maybe we get back to, it used to be you couldn't go to the pros for 3 years. You still can't. But now, obviously, where a coach could say before, well, I'm going to recruit you, and if I can get this kid to my school, if they want to transfer, they got to sit out a year. So that's not going to be appealing. If they want to go to the pros, they got to wait 3 years. So I'm going to have them. I'm going to be able to develop them. I've got plenty of time. And maybe we do end up in a world where those star players are getting longer contracts. That's serving as the anchor for a program that allows coaches to kind of build. But I still worry about the coaches. I still worry about the volume of transfers in the portal, the volume of work. Like I look at the college coaching profession and I think, why would anybody want to do that at this point? Like it used to be college and pro were different. They were both equally hard, but they were different. Pro was so cutthroat and everybody knows everybody so well, and you got to deal with free agency and roster building and a salary cap. But college, you had to go recruit high school kids in their living rooms with their parents, right? But now it's like a college head coach is doing all the things that a pro head coach is doing, and they have to recruit high school kids. Like it just worries me, and I feel like if we don't find ways to solve this and create stability, we're going to lose a lot of our best coaches.
Yeah, and I think something else that's tough, and a few people have talked about this. Miami and Indiana are both some of the older teams in college football, being that they have fourth, fifth, and even some sixth-year guys. And when
Yeah.
you have 18, 19, 20-year-olds going against 21, 22, God forbid 23, it's an entirely different game. Like the mass in the body and your ability to deal with stress and complex situations is entirely different. So I think that's another element. I thought that after 2024, some of that was going to die down after COVID. But it seems to me guys keep finding ways to get another year of eligibility for either this reason, that reason, or the other. And then that continues to compound the problem of the transfer. Exactly. Continues to compound the problem of kids transferring. If I got another year and it didn't really work out here, I'm going to go over here. And I got injured, but I didn't really like this program, so now I'm going to go over here. But coaches keep seeing that film that they have from you, and instead of going to go get that high school kid, they go and get you. Like that that perpetuates the problem. I don't know that there's any one pill solution here. I don't think that there's anything that can be said or done that's going to get this into the right direction. But it really is starting to feel like you're going to need a college football commissioner. You're going to need a college football collective bargaining agreement for the players. You're going to need a players association and get things hashed out that way. And then I don't even know who represents a players association, because they're going to be gone. God forbid they transfer to the basketball, players association or something like that. So it's just, I really don't know. I think the most important thing is protecting the integrity of the children from these young men and very vicious contracts and contracts that can take advantage of them, and get them understanding, one, there's the value in education, and two, there's the value of developing, right? Like people are chasing money now, forgetting that Kirby Smart puts out more NFL dudes than anybody.
Right.
If you're a defensive guy, go there. If you're an offensive guy, I want to go play for Lincoln Riley, right? I want to go get developed by the guys who are going to get me ready for the next level. And some of that nuance has to come back.
Let me ask you one last question on this, because it was interesting to me. I was seeing that DeMond Williams' deal next year is going to be roughly the same size of Shedeur Sanders' entire 3-year rookie contract. And it was interesting to me that right now, the market in the wild, wild west, with all of this turnover and the frenzy that is trying to get the right butts and seats for your program in this short window of time, is leading to these prices that actually don't make sense to me. Like, it doesn't make sense to me that a good but not elite college quarterback is on a 1-year deal that pays more than the 3-year deal of a guy that got drafted in the 3rd round. Like, that's just weird to me. And so my question to you is, do you think the college market is going to regress to the mean a bit? Or do you think the rookie salaries in the NFL will be adjusted for the NFL to make it more appealing for these quarterbacks to move on and not just stay in college? Or do you think the NFL actually loves this, and we will live in this world where college quarterbacks are getting paid more to be in college, and then you're not coming to the NFL necessarily to get paid more right away. You're coming to earn your second contract.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're getting more seasoned guys as a result, who are sticking around longer and coming in with more reps. And
yeah, I think that's true only for the elite of the elite, right? If you're, the 12th guy per se on defense, you're still in the rotation significantly. You still got a shot for the NFL. You're not making that money, so you're earning every single contract every single day. I think it's great for quarterbacks in particular. We've seen, and this continues to be a story, guys who have more starts in college tend to translate better in the NFL. Not always the case, but can be the case. And so why would you not want another year to develop? Shout out to Dante Moore for his maturity and probably seeing his draft stock plummet just a little bit after his performance against Indiana.
What do you think Dylan Raiola thought of that? Do you think he thought he was coming back, or do you think he signed with Oregon betting on Dante going to the pros, and then Dante had that disaster of a game and had no choice but to come back?
Did he sign or did he commit?
Oh,
I actually see. I don't know if he actually did.
I think I saw he committed. His post is "I'm committed." #committed. So that's a great point. That is that is a distinction with a difference.
Yes. So I'm not sure what what he was thinking, my only assumption would be that Dante Moore is going to the NFL. Dante Moore, on the other hand, he transferred knowing that he was likely going to sit behind Dylan Gabriel,
Right.
and maybe win the spot, maybe not. But I don't think that was the case for Raiola. Back to the college players, yeah, I think it's an interesting concept, but I don't think that I think that the NFL is going to continue to increase the value of rookie contracts as these guys build these bigger brands getting into the NFL. The PA and the collective bargaining agreement is going to say, hey, these guys are bringing more eyeballs in. They're bigger stars than they were when they're coming in. They've got millions of followers, not 10 followers like, 10 years ago. So they need to be paid appropriately in that first round. So I think that happens. I think the NFL will continue to go up, but I do think that college football will regress down to a mean, because I do think that you are going to start seeing, where's the bang for my buck? Texas Tech spent how much money this year? And they got wiped in the first round. Oregon continues to spend money. Ohio State, all these big programs continue to spend money, but it's not necessarily translating to an absolute win, except for Ohio State. They won it last year, and they paid a lot for that roster.
They did.
Similar situations I think are going to continue to play out. All these teams that are paying a bunch of money, not seeing national championship wins, college football playoff appearances, they're going to be like, well, why do we keep paying these guys? Why do I keep paying this transfer quarterback and having a new transfer quarterback every single year for $2 million, and we can't even sniff the playoff, or we can't win a playoff game? And that's going to start to really frustrate people, and it's going to bring values down.
That's going to be a harsh reality for a lot of programs and fan bases, that in the early days you could throw a lot of money at it and get the best players to come, but there are only so many great players across the country, and they're going to be pulled in all these different directions when everybody's throwing the same amount of money. And you're right. I think that competition is actually not going to drive prices up. I think everybody's going to realize that they're getting into an arms race that nobody wins, and ultimately, I'm not going to call it collusion, but I think the conferences and the programs are going to start looking each other's in the eyes and going, why are we doing this?
There's college GMs that were just, player personnel coaches, and the coaching is such a small world. Are there a lot of colleges? Yes, but somebody's been here who knows somebody here who knows a guy there. It's all intertwined in some way, shape, or form, because when staffs leave, they take their guys with them. When they get fired, they take their guys with them, and all these sorts of things. So they're going to call up, how much are you guys offering Raiola right now? His family's screaming at me. They want I'm not saying this is happening, by the way. No disrespect to Dylan Raiola. Just name for an example.
Right.
Hey, they're asking for this. What are you guys talking about? It's like, man, they asked us for the same. And it's going to be like, okay, we're getting joked here.
Yeah.
He's not worth that. Or they
everybody's got an Uncle
this.
Dennis, not just Kawhi.
Everybody's got an Uncle Dennis, right?
And
we talked about this a little bit last week. If things get shrunk down and the money stops being as big, they're going to find ways to keep doing the Kawhi, the under the table.
Agreed. So we've got one game left. We have Miami and Indiana in Coral Gables on Monday night for all the marbles. And then we're going to get into a really interesting offseason. It's going to be interesting to see what the powers that be do to evolve the playoff, what they do about the transfer window, which was so problematic this year.
It's been problematic.
It's been problematic. There is no better time than now for change in college football. It's funny. I read an article the other day that said college football has never been better and it's never been more broken. And those two things should not be true at the same time, but they are. And this is a great opportunity for us to move the sport forward. Now,
real quick, I just think that you said something interesting. You said the college football offseason. Offseason? It used to be just the end of the college football season. We'll let you know what our recruiting class is, and we'll see you next August.
Yep.
And you just said offseason? Come on now.
I'm saying.
That's crazy.
That's where we are. That's where we are. It's a professional sport.
It is.
365 days a year. Wait until spring games actually start counting for something. Oh, we should actually play games in the spring. You know what the NFL's not doing? Let's play in the spring.
They tried that.
I know. All right, let's talk about the NFL, because we were treated to one incredible wild card weekend. It kicked off with 2 one-score games in the Rams-Panthers and the Packers and Bears. Of course, the Rams were able to emerge victorious from Charlotte, beating the Panthers 34-31. And then the Bears did what the Bears have done all year long, On the one hand, it's like, give Ben Johnson coach of the year when you look at all of these massive deficits and these like mind-boggling comebacks. How could anybody else win it? But then I would offer, well, look at all these holes that they've been in all year long that they've had to dig themselves out of. And once again, to be down 21-6 going into the fourth quarter and to put up 25 fourth quarter points to beat the Packers. Just incredible. What can I say? I mean, two great games to start Saturday. What were you thinking at the end of Saturday?
At the end, I didn't know what to think. Both these games come down to the wire. You think somebody's got the game in the bag. They don't have it in the bag, but wait, they do have it in the bag. And I just thought it was so much fun to watch football on Saturday. I think that's the most fun I've had watching football all year this year. The Rams, I think, walked into a trap. Right, you get a team that's quote unquote not as good, who gave you a run for your money earlier this year. They got you, and you're supposed to be the higher seed. You got Devontae Adams back. You're supposed to win this game, but you had to travel to Carolina, and that's a scary situation. Like, you've got teams that are literally fighting for their lives. Right, the regular season does not matter. All right, we've seen wild card teams make what am I trying to say? Like, make runs before. Like, it's not. It's also the NFL. Anybody can win on any given week. Right?
Well, in the last three division winners who won their division with a sub 500 record all won their wild card game. And two of those teams came
That's
from
a
the
crazy
NFC
stat.
South. And then also the Seahawks, who that year they were 7-9, and then they traded for Marshawn halfway through the year, and they had the Beastquake game.
Right.
Over the Saints, beat the defending world champion Saints. So, as much as I certainly wrote them off, and when I did my official pick for the week, I ended up picking Rams. I just couldn't get behind Panthers plus 10.5. But then watching the game, I was kicking myself. What was I thinking? Like, I've watched this Panthers team enough this year to know, man, they're feisty and they fight. And that's what they did. And, credit to the Rams for getting that win. But the Panthers showed me something.
They absolutely did that. As bitter as it is for them, that's going to leave a positive taste in their mouth going forward. And that's the last 2 years in a row now with Dave Canales. They've ended the season going, okay, there's something here. Now, next year needs to be a big leap. I think it needs to be a Lions-type leap from a couple years ago. Like, hey, we need to actually win 10-plus games. But they got to feel really positive about their opportunistic defensive team and how Bryce Young in some big moments has been able to get hot. I don't think he's played particularly great all game. He's kind of a streaky guy, but when he gets hot, he shows you why he was a number one pick overall.
And credit to him. They picked up his fifth-year option today, and I would say he earned it. I think when you look at where he was at the end of his rookie year, when you look at where he was for most of last year before he finished the year strong, it was looking like Jamarcus Russell type number one pick bust. Like it was not going to happen. Even like less the codeine. That was I'm not saying that Bryce Young had the off the field issues at all that Jamarcus
right.
Russell had, but credit to him because he's really turned it around. He's earned another shot in 2026. He does have a big bodied potential true number one wide receiver now. He's got a couple of good running backs in the backfield. They could take a step forward with a good draft.
Yeah, I can't remember. Was he there with Matt Rule for 1 year?
Yes.
So Matt Rule for 1 year, and then he gets Frank Reich. Frank Reich gets fired middle of the season, interim coach. Then you get Dave Canales. So almost kind of like Trevor Lawrence. I think Trevor Lawrence ultimately more talented and has more tools to work with, but kind of the same situation. Like, he just had no stability, and the roster was atrocious. So you're starting to see the fruits of him getting comfortable in the NFL with some consistency. And so credit to the Panthers for being just a little bit more patient, saying, hey, we know we haven't given you a lot of stability. We're going to give you a chance. And like you said, he earned that fifth-year option.
So, Bears. More impressed with the Bears for coming from 21-6 down, or more disappointed in the Bears to put themselves in that kind of hole? And felt like they were the better team, especially when they started marching back. When both teams were really leaning in, just felt to me like the Bears were a better team with more of an identity. And I guess part of that identity is we don't win games from ahead. We only win games from behind.
Yeah. But to me, there's like you're talking about, the little bit of that identity crisis for the Packers of themselves. And I want to talk about the Packers before the Bears. I'm not sure who the inspiring leader is on that team. Jordan Love seems a little too quiet for me. You've got a receiving core that's got some juice at times, but I don't know who to point to be like, that's the guy I'm rallying behind. Now, Jordan Love played a flawless game, but it didn't really feel like he played a flawless game.
It didn't.
It didn't really feel like it. So no such thing as empty touchdowns, but what went wrong offensively for him in the huddle being like, hey guys, we need a 6-minute drive here. Because 25 points is inexcusable. You have that touchdown by Matthew Golden. Incredible effort by him to get in the end zone, essentially off that screen pass. But goodness gracious, find a way to close out the game. And that's what the great quarterbacks do, is controlling the game, not just calling the plays that, my coach calls. It's like, hey, like, that play ain't going to work. We need to take more time off the clock. And having those kind of conversations go back and forth and ensure that you have the ball to end the game and that you are closing things out with 2 and 3 minutes to go, if not even 4 minutes to go. And so I think that's a problem that the Packers are going to have to address, is who is taking ownership and leadership in those positions where it's time to finish somebody, to keep their foot on the throat.
You know what's tough is Jordan Love's a Packer. So I can't help but thinking about past Packer quarterbacks. And prime Aaron Rodgers as a Packer, in those moments, you believed he was going to close those games out. Prime Brett Favre as a Packer, you believed, to your point, whether he had to, scramble for a first down, he was going to find guys underneath, he was going to make a big play deep, you just believed.
Yeah.
Now, Brett also had a propensity for throwing interceptions. But I just never believe with Jordan Love. He's one of those guys in the league where I'm like, I know he can do it. Because I see all these beautiful throws that he makes to these talented receivers. But yeah, like when it gets into crunch time, I have no faith that he is going to know where to go with the ball, that any one of his receivers are just going to be like, I'm the man, I'm going to get open, go to me 10 times, right? They just don't have that guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't shocking to me. It was surprising that they lost, but it wasn't shocking that they lost. And now,
okay, that had to be shocking. There's no way you give up 25. And it wasn't like there was a defensive or special teams touchdown.
It wasn't shocking just because this is what the Bears have done this year. And it's funny, I was watching this game with my dearest friend in the world, David. He's a born and raised Bears fan from Chicago. His whole family was at my house for the weekend. And we bet on the Bears before the game. And I had joked with him. I said, the only thing that we're doing wrong here is that we should wait until the Bears are down 2 or 3 touchdowns and then bet on them. We'll get much better odds. And sure enough, when the Bears are down 21-6 going into the fourth quarter, I look at the odds and it's like 5-1. And I was like, oh man, we should bet more. And he was like, I think we have enough on the Bears right now. But then they do it, they pull it out. And I got to say, like, I certainly didn't come away from that game feeling great about the Bears, but I felt like they were the better team in that game and they deserved to win, even as improbable as it was.
I don't know. To me, they didn't look like the better team. To me, they looked like the team that cared more. The Packers were there
That's a good way of putting it.
To be on the field, throw the football around, and like walk out with a win. Not come in with an intent and a purpose to dominate a football game. And that's how talented they are. And again, like, we're forgetting that they lost Micah Parsons and a few other key contributors. But again, like, there's no excuse to lose that game. Back to celebrating the Bears here. I don't think anybody has a deeper bag than Ben Johnson right now. When it comes time to, I need this third down, what play do I go to? Maybe Kyle Shanahan's up there. Not maybe. Kyle Shanahan is up there as well. But he just has a Rolodex of plays that just puts the defense in the exact look that he needs to get the receiver right where he needs him to complete the pass for Caleb Williams. It's just special. So when you have the ability to make those big second downs, third downs, to get your fourth downs. I know I'm going through all the downs, but I'm thinking about all the possible situations you can have here. And then you've got Caleb Williams when it doesn't go right on just your regular second down, and he can scramble and make a crazy play. Now you're like, okay, there's literally no way to beat these guys. Because if I cover the play, Caleb's got it. If I don't cover the play, Ben Johnson just made me look like an idiot. And that pairing wasn't a pairing I wasn't going to expect, that I didn't expect. I thought Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams were going to be butting heads. Ben Johnson wants you to do A, B, C, D, E, run my offense. And Caleb Williams is like,
Yeah.
I kind of want to ball and do my thing a little bit. And I thought that marriage was going to be atrocious, but it seems to be working out. And what I love is that they're not shying away from running between the tackles, whether that's Swift or Monungai. I think both of those guys have done a great job of squaring their shoulders and getting upfield. You can't get the yards going sideways.
No,
Okay?
you can't.
Yards are only going forward. And that was a big change for Swift in particular that he didn't do in Detroit, which is why I moved on from him. And
Or
Ben said,
Philly.
I'm going to, or Philly. And he said, Ben said, hey, I'm going to give you one more chance. Run north-south for me. And I think it's completely changed the complexity of that offense because he's also a great receiving threat.
Now, I want to call out one other guy that has changed the complexion of that offense, and that's Colston Loveland, who, for most of the year, I said the better tight end this year in the rookie class was Tyler Warren. And, it's hard to argue with that when the Colts were 8-1 or whatever they were.
With a healthy Daniel Jones.
But ultimately, Loveland has come on really strong, and he was showcasing his ability at a premier level in this game. He had 8 catches for 137 yards, and it felt like every catch was consequential. Every catch was for a chunk of yards. It was in a, tight position, and that I think opened up the middle of the field. And when you think about a couple of the big plays that DJ Moore made late, because Loveland was so dangerous and they had to focus on him, he gave extra room to everybody in the receiving corps. DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, did Luther Burden play? He played too,
Luther
right?
Burden played.
Yeah, Luther Burden. Yeah. I love that receiving corps. But I think Colston Loveland is like a skeleton key for that offense. And he really showed it against the Packers.
Yeah, his development throughout this season and Ben Johnson's willingness to kind of increase his workload throughout the year. I'm not going to throw you into the deep end and ask you to be George Kittle or Travis Kelce right away, but I'm going to work you in. And then also, I'm not going to show the rest of the world that I have you until I really need you. And the way that he came on at the end of the season, again, catching passes, but he's in the trenches too. I don't know if he's the world's greatest blocker, but he's certainly more than effective to be in there. So you're not entirely sure if it's run or pass. And then I think what you're talking about being a skeleton key in that offense, anytime you have a tight end that can catch passes and block at a really high rate, and especially catch those passes, it changes the ways your safeties and your outside linebackers have to play. They can't sit on the hook. They can't just stay, up close to the line of scrimmage and cheat the pass because they know that the tight end can't run past you. Colston Loveland can run past you, and he can make contested catches. And so when you have to worry about that and you got to feel him kind of working behind you, it's going to pull you just a little bit further this way. And then, like you're saying, that's when DJ Moore gets behind you. That's when Luther Burden gets behind you. It's like, okay, we're keeping everything in front. He's great after the catch. So now he's taking a nice little 6-yard hitch route and he's getting, 9 to 13 yards. And those kind of things completely change your offense.
Agreed. So Saturday was a great day in football, and if that wasn't enough, we were treated to another pretty darn great day of football on Sunday. It didn't end as well. The Patriots just stomped out the Chargers. Poor Justin Herbert. I don't think we need to talk about that too much, except for the fact that every time he got hit, I felt that pain a little bit. I can only imagine how he felt on Monday morning. But Patriots move on. The two games that were more consequential on Sunday were the Bills upsetting the Jaguars in Jacksonville and the 49ers upsetting the Eagles in Philly. Which of these was more surprising to you?
We talked about it last week. None of these were that surprising. There's the inevitability of the Thanos that is Josh Allen, who can will a team to victory. And then you've got the Niners. We talked about the coaching mismatch, right? If this wasn't going to be a blowout run performance from Philadelphia and it turned into kind of a little bit of a slug out chess match, that Kyle Shanahan's going to beat Sirianni. And I can't remember the offensive coordinator who they just let go of today. Yes. You knew that was going to happen. And so what I would say is more surprising is the Eagles letdown, though. Missing the Niners defense, missing so many players, and their inability to run the football effectively with Saquon Barkley shocked me. Offensively, Jalen Hurts not being able to get the ball into the hands of his playmakers. A.J. Brown, say what you want. We talked about this. Dropping that pass right in his hands would have been an absolute game changer. There's just so many things that aren't quite right with the Philadelphia Eagles. And so, again, yeah, just impressive to see the Niners pull out that win.
And I was shocked that the Eagle defense allowed 13 fourth quarter points to give up that game. I mean, if it was the offense not getting a final score, that would be one thing. But to see the defense break down and, for Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey to take over that fourth quarter like they did, they absolutely took it over. That was a little bit surprising to me, but I also held San Francisco money line ticket. And, that was one that the spread actually went in the Eagles' direction. And so at kickoff, I was like, man, I didn't even get all the value that was out there. And sure enough, Niners pull that one out. And then, of course, on Monday night, wrapping up Wild Card weekend, Weird Uncle Aaron Rodgers is done for the year as the Steelers get trounced at home, 30-6. I'm not going to say I told you so, but I'm going to say I told you so. That Texans defense was just nasty. So nasty.
Hand up. Accountability. I was wrong. I thought there was a moment Aaron Rodgers could make things work, maybe show a little bit of magic. Just not enough offensive creativity to slow down that pass rush. And I'm not sure anybody has enough creativity to slow down that pass rush. But goodness gracious, if Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter didn't absolutely make life a living hell for Aaron Rodgers. Not only that, the amount of batted passes getting down at the line, getting Aaron Rodgers out of rhythm when he wanted to get the ball out quickly.
DK didn't do him any favors. DK had one play really early and then disappeared. He pulled a DK.
And DK's been doing that. You're a Seattle fan. You know this. He can disappear as big of a presence as he is and all the talent he has. For some reason, he just doesn't dominate the game. And you figure, okay, Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf, is this going to be another Devontae Adams or a Jordy Nelson type situation, kind of a bigger physical guy? We just haven't seen that. And I'm not sure whether to blame Arthur Smith or whether to blame Aaron Rodgers for not wanting to develop and be up with the times for a modern NFL offense. But yeah, there was just nothing there. They were truly outmatched because that Titans offense didn't do anything special. They ran the ball particularly well, but it hadn't been hard to run the ball on the Steelers this entire season.
No.
So they just showed up and played a game of football.
And it was 7-6 to start the fourth quarter. Let's not forget that. I mean,
they just went crazy.
Avalanche in the fourth quarter. With 2 defensive touchdowns, no less. That defense just said, we're actually done for this week, so we're going to shut this one down. Now, as we look ahead to the divisional round, the cream rises to the top a bit. Buffalo has got to go into Denver. Now, early in the week, this was Buffalo -1.5. The spread is flipped. The public money coming in this week, I don't know if I'll say generally early money tends to be more sharp. Late money closer to kickoff tends to be more public better money. So the fact that this is happening midweek, it's hard to kind of say what is flipping this, but it has flipped from Buffalo -1.5 to Denver -1.5 at home. Where are you leaning in this game?
I think Denver by probably 10 points here. And it's not any disrespect to Buffalo. I saw what the Texans were able to do to Buffalo late in the season. I just believe that Denver has such a strong defense, an arrested defense right now, that they're going to snuff out Josh Allen. He can only make so many heroic plays. And again, Josh Allen this year more than any other year, trying to put the team on his back, has taken awful sacks. If he does that against Denver and allows Denver to have a couple of short fields and get on the board early, it's going to be game over. We know that Denver is going to find a way to light things up late in the third quarter, early on and through the fourth. But if they let Denver get going sooner than later because Josh Allen's taking bad sacks and you're costing your team 15, 20 yards of field position, or Josh Allen starts trying to force the football, or maybe that hand injury that he got after hitting the helmet on his follow-through, if that starts to impact and he can't quite drive the football in Mile High Stadium, it's going to get ugly really quick. And I just don't think that there's enough personnel on that team for them to be able to win.
But let me ask the question a little bit differently. Do you think Denver can score enough against this slightly above average Buffalo defense to prevent Josh from putting his cape on and winning the game? Because when you look back at the Jacksonville game last week,
Hmm.
James Cook was held like 42, 43 yards on like 3 yards per carry. So Jacksonville did a great job taking out Josh's number one option. And then Josh just found a way to make plays. But the bigger problem was that Trevor Lawrence, for most of the game, looked like Trevor Lawrence of old, and that Jacksonville offense wasn't creative and it didn't, dug itself into holes and didn't get out of them. So my question is really like I'm confident the Denver defense is going to mostly take James Cook out of this. I think the Denver secondary is even better than the Jaguars, not just because of Surtain, but certainly because they have the best, defensive back in all of football. My question is Bo Nix going to be able to score in this, high pressure playoff environment at home, but high pressure playoff environment? Or, is he going to take some kind of, first time knocks and learn a few lessons along the way?
I think he's taken so many snaps between college and starting all of last year that this year I don't expect to see him have any sort of, oh, this is my first time in the playoffs. Like, I'm not really sure what to do here. I don't know. I think he's going to be just fine. And I think Sean Payton's going to prepare him that way. And I think that having a guy like Sean Payton, who's been in playoff scenarios, who's coached the Drew Breeses, who can get a guy in the right mental headspace to approach having that bye week as that number one seed and preparing for it, I think they're going to be just fine. There might be a little rust to knock off, coming out of the bye week, but I think that they're going to be supremely prepared. And again, that defense that they have, I think is going to be the determining factor. I really think that they're going to have at least one touchdown in this game. Josh Allen's going to give it up. And whether they directly score the touchdown or whether they put the Broncos in field position for the offense to score, creating a turnover, that is going to happen. And that's why I think it's going to end up being almost a 2-score game, because that touchdown counts extra.
And I just don't see Josh Allen and the Bills winning on the road 3 times to win the AFC. I just don't see it. And so I think, if it's not this week, then it's got to be Texans, because if the Texans lose to the Patriots, I think Josh Allen will beat the Patriots in an AFC championship game. I think in hindsight, we're going to say this is the year that could have been for Josh and wasn't. And I agree it's going to be a Broncos win. I tend to think it's going to be a little bit closer because the Broncos made a habit of making most of their games closer than they needed to be this year.
Sure.
So I have a feeling. But if it is a 10-point game, I certainly won't be shocked.
Yeah, I think it's going to be similar. And just to wrap it up, it's going to be similar to what we saw the Texans do to the Bills. A lot of sacks for Josh Allen, a lot of frustration, trying to do just a little bit too much, knowing that this might be his year with a down year. I don't think it happens.
All right.
Broncos by 50.
In the evening game from Lumen Field in Seattle, the San Francisco 49ers are 7-point underdogs coming into Seattle. There is no George Kittle in this game. We do expect that Trent Williams will play again. Ricky Pearsall up in the air. But now word is
Brandon
Fred
Ayuk.
Warner.
Kidding.
No, not Brandon Ayuk. He's done. But Fred Warner could be back on the field for this one. Very interesting. Heart and soul of the defense. A defense that has been chewed up on the ground.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine that even a sub 100% Fred Warner can't help this San Francisco defense do better than it's been doing defending the run.
Absolutely, and it's the inspiration side as well. It's having your leader back in there, the guy who wants to knock heads, the guy who is in the locker room. He's not 100%, but he's still out there balling with you, and he's going to give you everything you got. I always go back to the who was the Giants coach for the Super Bowl? Was it Tom Coughlin?
Yeah,
Tom Coughlin. And Strahan was talking about what his pump up talk was at the Super Bowl, and it wasn't, we're gonna go out there and get. He went around the room and he was like, "What injury are you playing with? What about you?" And just calls out everybody it doesn't matter how we're feeling, we've got to go out there and play. So it's not rah rah. It's we're all hurt. and we're all going to go out there and ball out. So that's what I think you're going to get out of Fred Warner, and it would be impactful. Man, I just don't see how they're going to be able to chase Jackson Smith and Jigba all over the field. I know we like Denominator Lenore. I don't know if Saleh has him traveling back and forth.
He hasn't all
with
year.
His defense. Yeah, so, I mean...
And he likes... Let me say it this way. Nobody is a bigger fan of Lenore than Lenore. I'm not sure that anybody else feels the same way that he feels about his abilities.
No doubt. And go Ducks, by the way. Yeah, and I just... 7 points surprises me. But again, it's hard to unsee what we saw in Week 18. It's just hard to unsee the way Seattle was able to dismantle them and completely take San Francisco out of their offense that had just won them a game, right? They just used this offense with Christian McCaffrey. They completely shut him down. So if you shut Christian McCaffrey down, and I get that they didn't have Trent Williams, but now they don't have George Kittle. Maybe
exactly.
their skeleton key.
Who would you rather have? Because that offense against Philly, once George Kittle went out and they started trying to, run Robert Tonjes on his plays, it was not looking good.
No.
I mean, Trent Williams is an all-timer, but so is Kittle for these 49ers. I don't know who the bigger loss is, to be honest.
Yeah, I think with a week of preparation, I would much, much rather have Trent Williams to keep your offensive line churning, to make sure that you can hand the ball to Christian McCaffrey and at least get 4 yards a carry, right? That's what you're going to be able to need. With Kittle, and I love Kyle Shanahan for this, and Tonjes obviously is not the same as Kittle. He can scheme an offense that doesn't necessarily need the tight end. He'll be able to go to Tonjes every once in a while, when they're not really paying attention to him, and it's not going to be a 50-yard bomb, but it might get you, 7 yards on a second and 10. So now you got 3rd and short. Now you can call the whole playbook. So I think that's why I'd rather have Trent Williams, is knowing that the rest of the offense can move smoothly. But if you're giving up penetration in the run game, or you're giving up sacks in the pass game because you don't have your all-pro, your Hall of Famer, that's more detrimental than not having a guy to throw to.
Yeah. For me, the only play in this game is San Francisco +7. I don't know that I would feel great about it. I won't be betting it myself. I actually might have to bet the San Francisco money line. I put a big bet on Seattle to win the NFC. So now Seattle's 2 games away. The cash out is 2.5 times my initial bet. So the question is, do I stay where I am here? Or do I let it ride to 6.5 times? I had it, 6.5 to 1 odds.
Let it ride, baby. Let it ride.
I know, but they're 3-1 this weekend. So, I could throw, $100 at San Francisco, and then I could at least make sure that I don't lose money in all of this. But then, is that bad juju? I think that's bad juju. I don't think we could do that. So it looks like we're going to ride with Seattle, and I'm just going to be hanging on for dear life that the Seahawks get a win and move on to host the NFC Championship game at home. All right.
Wrapped it up beautifully.
Texans and Patriots kick us off on Sunday at noon Pacific time from Foxborough. The Patriots are 3.5-point favorites. They were 3.5-point favorites last week against the Chargers at home. Now they're 3.5-point favorites against the Texans at home. Dare I say the Texans are a much better team than the Chargers?
Yes. Not dare you say, absolutely. And they're just healthier than the Chargers were.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They don't have the best offensive line in football, but the Chargers might have had the worst offensive line in football.
Yeah, not just that, but the philosophy on the team is clearly identified. Chargers, and I thought that they had established this well last year, wanted to be a physical run defense and then ask Justin Herbert physical run offense, and then have Justin Herbert make special plays, when the time came. But this year, because of those injuries, everything just kind of fell apart, and you saw a version of Justin Herbert that was absolutely the worst of the worst. You talk about that clip of Sam Darnold talking about seeing ghosts when he was playing for the Jets. Herbert was back there just eyes wide shut. Did not know what to do with the football. And is that credit to Mike Vrabel? Is that I'm not sure about. All I know is I thought the Patriots were absolute frauds. I thought the Chargers were going to win that game, and they trounced them. They embarrassed them. That pass rush was better than I thought, although I know the offensive line is struggling. You've got Joel and Slater out for the season. But even the receivers could get zero separation. Quentin Johnson, I don't know what happened to the way he started the year. Horrible. Lad McConkey, absolutely taken out of the game.
Where
Like,
was
who did you
that?
go to?
I mean, he's the guy that, like, the Julian Edelman type guy that you expect that even in the tightest situations, he's going to be able to run underneath routes
Yeah.
and keep the chains moving. And he was a non-factor in that game.
And hear me out.
Even after Christian Gonzalez went out.
I don't like to be a blame an OC guy. We saw Greg Roman with John Harbaugh do some of this with the Ravens. Try to not play to the strengths of your extremely talented quarterback in running a very simple offense. So I'll leave it at that because that's not what we're talking about. Texans, much better team. Now, to me, the problem is I trust Jake May to let the ball fly. Whether it's a perfect pass or whether he's just giving his receiver a chance, he's going to let the ball fly. He's going to take licks from Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. There's no doubt about it. But I think he's going to keep getting up, be unaffected, and let the ball go. And because the Texans' offense has struggled so massively this year, and they really haven't turned it on or turned it around, that's going to end up being the difference. Is I think the Patriots actually have a decent offense. Whatever Josh McDaniels is doing with Drake May looks great. They're unlocking Stephon Diggs. They're unlocking Pop Douglas. They're unlocking Keyshawn Boutte. Ramondre Stevenson said, I'm not letting Travion Henderson take my job. You've got those two competing with each other nose to nose for who's getting more snaps. Like, this offense is just committed to being the best version of itself, and that is what's going to beat the Texans.
Okay. Well, look, I can't argue with this offense looking as good as it's looking. I remember Ramondre burst through the line a couple of times in this last game, and I thought, where was that guy all year? As somebody who had him in fantasy, and
right,
he played very tentatively at times, but I mean, they are cooking. I just think that this Texans team is a little bit better. I think, to me, this reminds me of that Seahawks Broncos Super Bowl back in the day where Peyton was leading the number one offense and the Legion of Boom was the number one defense, and everybody wants to believe that the number one offense beats the number one defense, but it's almost always the number one defense that beats the number one offense. And in this one, I think that the Texans are going to make this a low-scoring game like last week, but I think that they will ultimately make a few more plays than the Patriots, and I think it's going to be Texans 14-13.
And I could see that scenario. And when I said that's why the Patriots will win, I should have phrased that maybe as Patriots could win. I feel more confident in the identity that is the Houston Texans. And I just, I don't think it's, you said this was what was the spread on this?
3.5. And that's what
3.5?
I want to get to last. It's like, so which side are you going to pick? Because, boy, you get the Texans and 3.5 points. You get more than a field goal.
That's hard to argue with.
Right?
But then again, you got to go to Gillette Stadium. Houston's an indoor stadium. I don't really know how much that affects you because CJ Stroud played at Ohio State. It's not like he's never played in cold weather. He's got more than a capable arm to, throw the ball in some windy conditions. I'm so back and forth on this one. I thought by the time I talked this out, I was going to have a really firm opinion here. I don't have one. But I will. Right. But for the sake of gambling, I'm taking the Texans in the points. That's too good to deny.
Agreed. All right, last game of the week. The Los Angeles Rams are going to Chicago into Soldier Field to take on the Bears, and they are 3.5-point favorites. Oh, the disrespect. Chicago gets that big comeback win at home over their hated rival Packers. The Rams eke one out on the road against the worst team playing in the NFC playoffs this year. And yet, the Rams are 3.5-point favorites. Explain that to me.
The Rams should be the favorites. They are the better team. They have a more established team, if you will, as far as a coaching staff, a head coach. They've got a quarterback with Super Bowl winning experience. They've got an excellent run game with Kyron Williams and Blake Corum coming on into the year. They've got everything. Their defense, I don't think, has turned out to be as good as people thought it was to start the year. But goodness gracious, it's hard not to think that they are better than the Bears. Now, you add the element of going to Chicago. I'm not sure what the forecast is and how that's going to impact things in Chicago this late in the year. Oh, I guess now
19 degrees. It's projected to be 19 degrees at game
that's
time.
crispy. Any snow? Any snow out there?
No snow right now.
So I expect this game to be high scoring. It better be high scoring. Otherwise, I'm going to personally be upset and take offense to that. This might be one of those who has the ball last type situations, but I also would love to just see the Rams put a team away. I have no doubt that the Rams are going to put together a game plan and they're going to jump out on them and kind of show their experience and flex the muscle. But then, as teams have learned this year, can you put the Bears away? Can you stomp out any level of belief? I don't know if they
the
can.
Undertaker. They just get up.
They keep getting up and they keep making plays. And again, like you mentioned 25 points in the fourth quarter. Like, where did that even come from? You just blinked and they were in a position to win the game.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got no words for it. I'm going to take the Rams. I'm going to take the experience of Matt Stafford. Puka Nacua is going to be absolutely abusive towards Kyler Gordon if he looks like the way he did in the last game. He kept getting called out on broadcast. I was like, let this guy have a minute. He just got back from injury. So I expect Puka to have a big game, and this should be an offensive showdown.
I agree, and I don't love the 3.5. I would have much preferred this to be a Rams -2.5 spread because I think a field goal.
Tell me why 2.5.
Because I think that a field goal is really like I could see this going either way on a field goal. And it being like the last possession ends up winning it. And maybe it's 3 or maybe it's 4. Maybe it's the Rams are down by 3, they score a touchdown, win by 4. But I would just feel more comfortable at 2.5 backing the Rams. I'm still going to back the Rams at 3.5 because I can't back Chicago here. It has felt all year like the NFC, at least from where I've sat, was headed towards an NFC West NFC Championship game. And so I think you've got 49ers Seahawks this week, and I think the Seahawks will win that, but whoever wins, I think is going to be taking on the Rams for a spot in the Super Bowl. And that necessarily means the Rams are going to beat the Bears, and then the only question is, will they cover? And I think in most scenarios they will, especially because I don't think the Rams are going to let Chicago get off the mat if they get them down by 14, 17 points.
That's what you think, but we've seen Los Angeles let teams off the mat this year. You know what I mean? And maybe playoff football is going to be a little bit different, but we've seen them do that. We've seen them let teams off the mat. They let the Falcons off the mat.
They did.
Very, very, very recently for absolutely no reason. So, I don't know. They let the Seahawks off. They already let the Seahawks off.
Well, now you're talking me into the Bears. You just picked the Rams, and then I agreed with you, and now we're talking ourselves into the Bears.
I know, but you were talking about putting them away, and we were just talking about, this was going to be a last possession kind of deal. If they're putting them away, this is, a multi-score game, I think.
Pick. I'm going Bears. And to your point,
I wouldn't
it
do it.
is supposed to be a high-scoring game. 48.5 is the total. It's the highest total of the 4 games.
Wow.
Anything can happen with a lot of points on the board.
Yeah, I trust the Rams here.
All right, so I'm going Broncos, Seahawks, Texans, and Bears.
I don't hate it.
All right.
I don't hate it.
Well, let's get after it.
I was, you know what? I'm going to confess to something here. I was really on the fence today. I didn't take a firm side. I don't think in any of these picks. I'm like, but I'm talking myself back and forth between all these, which I hope indicates we're going to have a great weekend of football.
I couldn't agree more. As long as it's competitive football, I don't really care who wins, except for one game, because I do want the Seahawks to win. So
absolutely.
Let's go Seahawks. Let's have a great week of football. Let's have a great national championship. Hopefully Indiana absolutely rolls and puts the finishing touches on one of the greatest seasons in college football history. Nate, thank you again for joining me. It's been a great chat. I hope you have a great rest of the week.
Always a pleasure. We'll see you.
All right. AC, what's up? Welcome back to the show. It is NFL Divisional weekend. How are you feeling?
We just witnessed a damn near masterclass of a football weekend, with the exception of really 2 games. One of them was in college, and that was a rough one to watch. But, that game, even starting Saturday morning, stretching all the way to Sunday night, they were just banger after banger after banger. At least for 3/4 of that Chargers-Patriots game, and we'll talk about that. But I'm doing great, man. We're in the middle of my favorite time of football season, and that's where we just get golden matchups.
Well, John, we're going to talk about the golden matchups for this week. And of course, all of those fan bases are still feeling incredibly optimistic about their chances for this year. And if you're at this point in the playoffs, you probably feel pretty good about your team's foundation for the future as well. Of course, that is not the case for all of the other teams in the NFL. There are a number of teams whose fan bases, if you would think about it as one of those customer service rating things at like an airport restroom, is it like the sad face, the indifferent face, or the happy face? There are a lot of sad face teams right now and sad face fan bases. And what I want to do is I want to give you some head-to-heads. I'm going to give you two fan bases, and I'm going to ask whose team has made them sadder, not just coming out of 2025, but as we look ahead to 2026. All right. So my first question is, whose fan base or whose team's fan base is sadder, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the Arizona Cardinals? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers started super hot, won a bunch of games, and then were injured. And then as they got healthier, they got worse. And they went from a Super Bowl contender to almost certainly the division winner to not making the playoffs at all. Versus the Cardinals had a bad record all year. At least they kind of got that out of the way early, but they felt really good about themselves when they lost 5 straight games by a combined 13 points. And you look at the Cardinals at the end of the year, looks like they're going to get off Kyler. They've got a new coach coming in versus the Buccaneers are still with Baker. Like, that team isn't changing very much. The head coach isn't changing very much. So Cardinals or Buccaneers, which fan base is sadder going into 2026?
It's got to be the Bucks for me. The way that they ended the season after all of the MVP talk for Baker, after looking like you hit on a generational talent in Egbuka, and he was going to buoy your receiving core all the way until you got Godwin really fully healthy. And then looking at how it ended, where, hey, you won what you thought was the play-in game, but you still didn't make the playoffs. And then on top of that, Todd Bowles was not let go. So what kind of optimism do you really have moving forward? You have an aging defense that you don't have a ton of confidence in. And you look at the division, Atlanta is, looking like they might be able to improve. They fired their GM and their head coach. So a talent-loaded roster. With Bijan Robinson and Drake London and Kyle Pitts, who finally had a bit of a leap with that defense that they were hit and miss, but when they were hitting against good teams. Like, there's a lot of optimism there. We've talked ad nauseum about the Saints and Tyler Shuck and what Kellen Moore's done. So you see that division is surging. And then even when you look at the Panthers and what they've put together this year, if they can even improve their defense 5 more ranking spots, like, that's a team that, they're on the rise. So if you're looking at the Bucks, you're kind of wondering, is our window closing? Whereas on the other side, the only thing that sucks for the Cardinals more than those combined 13 points is they're tied for the worst record in football. But the problem is since their division is so stinking good, they have the hardest strength of schedule. So it's like, but you're actually the best of all the shitty teams. So you get the 3rd pick, not the 1st pick. Although, it's looking like they're not missing on Dante Moore. He's coming back to Oregon, which I'm sure we'll talk about if Jets fans are happy or sad about that. But I would think that the Bucks fans are the sad ones because, Jacoby Brissett is somebody that you can have come back, and we'll see who's going to be the quarterback there. Will it be somebody like Mac Jones, or are they going to try and, get somebody that,
And there's no shame in losing to the other 3 teams in the NFC West. I think, it is a little bit upside down that the 8 and 9 team has the sadder fan base than the 3 and 14 team, but I totally agree with you. Okay, so second head-to-head. Who has the sadder fan base? The Dallas Cowboys, 7-9-1. Dallas fans obviously always believe that this year is the year. Dak Prescott was looking really good for long stretches. There was a time when the Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens show was the best aerial attack in football. And yet the Cowboys still found a way to finish sub 500 and miss the playoffs again. But as sad as a Cowboys fan is, are they sadder than a Lions fan who finished at 9-8 after 2 straight years, not just in the playoffs, but really, really cementing that franchise as one of the preeminent contenders in the league, in theory, for multiple years to come, only to run into this year and have that all come to a crashing halt with a 9-8 season and missing the playoffs? Who is sadder looking ahead to 2026? Cowboys fans or Lions fans?
This is a really interesting one because there's a lot of optimism to be had for both of these franchises and both of these fan bases. On the
Do you
Cowboys
think
side,
either is optimistic on the whole?
I think Cowboys fans are very optimistic that if they can fix the defense and even get to some semblance of competency, and yes, they got very lucky that Javonte Williams made it through the whole year, but Dak's not going anywhere. They have a good tight end. They're going to continue to maintain one of CeeDee Lamb or George Pickens, if not both. Like, there's a lot of optimism that the offensive firepower will still stick around, and it looked good. Now, if they could fix the defense, that's exciting. And, you look at the rest of the NFC East, the Commanders took a huge step back year over year and then fired their offensive coordinator, who last year in 2014 had an electric offense with Jaden Daniels. He had one bad year and they let him go, which is shocking. With all the head coaching vacancies, maybe he finds himself into a head coaching role in one of these. Be interested to see how that works. And then you look at the Giants that, we'll see how Jackson Dart evolves. We'll see how Malik Neighbors is when he comes back. We'll see if Cam Scatabo is still Cam Scatabo when, he comes back from his ankle dislocation. But I think it's one of those things where for for Cowboys fans, there's optimism. Now, you look at the Lions side of the ball, and they lost Ben Johnson.
Wait. So I'm not asking, are there reasons for optimism among Cowboys fans? I'm asking, coming out of 2025, do you think a Cowboys fan finished that season and they pushed the smile button in the restroom? I don't. I think at best they were indifferent, probably sad face.
Okay,
Now, will they get themselves to optimistic by the end of next year or by the beginning of next year? Sure. But which one of these fan bases is sadder today?
It's got to be the Lions. I mean, the Lions are the fan base that they have to recognize they've never had a window like this. This could all come crashing down at any given moment. Dan Campbell said after that loss in the NFC Championship game 2 years ago to the Niners, this may have been our shot. And when the team is as talented as this Lions fan is, and I know they've had some injuries in the secondary down the stretch, but they had a healthy Aiden Hutchinson all year. They had healthy running backs all year, and they are heavily dependent on the running backs for success in their offense.
Yeah, but I mean, their offensive line was shredded.
But also, you don't know how long those running backs are going to maintain before they lose a step, and then you're back to the drawing board. So I think for the Lions fans that were coming in with number 1 overall seed aspirations, and the playoffs should have been a given, especially after dismantling Ben Johnson and the Bears in week 2, one of the only 50-point, maybe the only 50-point scoring from any NFL team this year. There's deep sadness there, but looking forward, I think if you're a Cowboys fan, you're a lot more excited.
Yeah, that's probably fair. Next one. Who is sadder among these two fan bases? Is it the Washington Commanders, who had a resurgent season last year, went all the way to the NFC Championship game, only to this year to fall back to 5-12 and sort of obscurity and just immateriality in the NFL? Now, of course, Jaden Daniels was hurt for a lot of that. But again, like, they have to look at Jaden Daniels and think about the way that he plays and how he got hurt and why he gets hurt and whether that's something that gets you scared or excited for the future. So is it the Washington Commanders or is it the Philadelphia Eagles who have a Super Bowl caliber roster? They know it because they just won one. And yet nobody's been booing more than the Eagles. Nobody's fans are more disgruntled than Eagles fans.
They're not sad, they're angry. They're angry and they love to be angry.
Anger is just a secondary emotion that's masking your underlying primary emotion, just sadness.
I think if you're taking out the Philly-ness of that fan base, which is hard to do, I think it's got to be the Commanders because Philly lost to Kyle Shanahan. And if you're looking yourself in the mirror, this is what Shanahan does. He develops an incredible game plan and he executes it. And for the Commanders, it's hard not to be incredibly disappointed on this season, thinking about what it could have been if Jaden Daniels takes a step forward. You have a bunch of players around him that should have been able to also improve when it comes to the offense. Yes, the defense aged a little bit more. I'm amazed that Bobby Wagner is still out there, still laying tackles. But to go from an NFC Championship appearance that maybe you're a year early or 2 years early, and then the NFC East is a down year. You see the Giants fall apart. You see the Cowboys sub 500. And you couldn't capitalize on that to even snag a wild card berth. And yeah, I also recognize that that is a tall task, considering what it took for the Niners and the Rams to make the wild card and how high they set that bar. But I think it's got to be the Commanders fans that are the sadder fan base. And, Philly, they'll retool their offensive defensive coordinator and they'll come back next year. They're still talented as heck.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, if you're a Commanders fan, you are hoping like heck that Jaden Daniels is going to come back healthy. He's going to have all of his athleticism, and he is going to stay healthy for an entire season because it's their only hope for competing in what is a very competitive NFC. All right, last one for you, and I saved the best for last. Coming out of this year, who is sadder, Jets fans or Browns fans?
Browns fans, they got to watch Myles Garrett get the sack record.
The sack-asterisk record.
Yeah, the asterisk record. That's fair. I think if you're a Browns fan, you're also like, so we're just going to do nothing with our quarterbacks. Great. We're going to get to watch Shadur next year. Jets fans, there's just zero reason for optimism there. Like, I don't know what you're feeling with Dante Moore going back to college because he doesn't want to be a Jets fan and he's going to make more money in NIL money this year.
Player. He can choose not to be a Jets fan.
He doesn't want to play for the Jets and he's going to make a lot of NIL money for another year. I don't know who you think is going to be there to bring you home. You just watched your defense be the first defense since the 1930s to not have a single interception all year. This was a rough year to be a Jets fan. And frankly, I'm amazed Aaron Glenn is keeping his job, even though he's a first-year head coach. This was bad. And the hard part is they started off that first week looking so good against the Steelers. I think they put up high 30s or low 40s, and Justin Fields looked like, holy crap, this guy is going to sling the ball this year. And they've got good players around him in Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. And then it all just came crashing down, and that dream lasted for a week.
Yeah. So you think the Jets are definitely the saddest fan base in the NFL right now?
I think so. Although, I mean, we're comparing to just terminally sad fans, and I imagine they're both just numb at this point.
That's fair. All right, well, let's talk about hope, because some of these fan bases have coach openings, and as they consider who they can go hire for their next head coach, that can inspire a lot of hope and a lot of fear in a fan base. So let's talk about each of these openings. And, honestly, I think we can agree that the first domino that has to fall is John Harbaugh. Once he chooses a landing spot, it sounds like everybody and their mother, anybody who has an opening, has reached out to Harbaugh to see if he's interested in leading their franchise. Once he decides, then I think you will start to see some of the other dominoes fall as well. But where do you want to start?
I mean, let's start with the Giants, where he was just spotted leaving the facility earlier today. With John Harbaugh, it's really interesting, and credit to the dude. He knows what he's worth. He is only taking 3 or 4 interviews, I believe, and he spent the weekend watching tape of the prospective teams he's going to come and take over. If you are a Giants fan looking forward, ferocious front four that should still be sticking around, good draft capital to build. You've got Jackson Dart that hopefully somebody like John Harbaugh, who just coached Lamar Jackson for half a decade now, and, taught him to not take hits. Like, maybe there's optimism there. And he's got receiving weapons that I don't think were really around in Baltimore during Lamar Jackson's time there. I think if you're the Giants, there's a lot of optimism. I'm not sure what their cap number looks like. But I could see Harbaugh going to New York and dealing with that kind of hostile media environment and being a place where he thrives.
Could I offer Kevin Stefanski for the New York Giants? I think they have a lot of offensive talent. They need somebody that can come in and put it together and can build an offense around Jackson Dart. I think that he was never going to win in Cleveland. Nobody ever wins in Cleveland. And moving from Cleveland to the Giants could be his second chance to prove, what he can do. So I actually kind of like that one. Otherwise, like, all the names that are out there are a bunch of retreads, like Antonio Pierce, Mike McCarthy, Raheem Morris. Like, certainly Raheem Morris can't get another job. Vance Joseph, maybe. But I kind of like Kevin Stefanski for that one.
I could see Stefanski. I think the Browns did him a solid by letting him go. They recognize that Stefanski is somebody who can go into an organization that has a team ready to win and actually make a difference versus blowing it up and starting it over and being a coach of a project team that's, it's great that they're getting the dead cap money off the books for Deshaun Watson finally, and they'll be able to actually make decisions and make moves, and they'll have picks again, but Stefanski's...
They shot themselves in the face with that Deshaun Watson contract. Yes. Fully guaranteed with all the things. I mean, that was so dumb.
It was. And
they traded a haul for him. They didn't just sign him. They gave up a ton of draft capital for him.
100%. And so I'm glad to see that Stefanski's going to get a chance to go start over somewhere fresh. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of those places that he might go is Miami. Now, Miami has also been a rumored landing spot for our Seahawks offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak. And it is also potentially a landing spot for Chris Shula, who is currently the Rams defensive coordinator and is Don Shula's grandson, which would be wild. I think it would be the first time ever that a grandfather and a grandson coach the same NFL franchise. If I'm Miami, I like the idea of going and getting a defensive coach. I think, they've reshaped their identity this year a lot around the power running game. I think if you're talking about playing complementary football, building a strong defense that can travel, which, that's always been a tough thing for Miami, is that, especially under Tua, they've been an offense that can air it out, a defense that can get some turnovers, but it's not a team that travels well. If they can be a defense first and power run team, I don't know. Miami might be able to compete in what is otherwise going to be a very challenging, very crowded AFC East for the next few years. So I like them going and getting a defensive coach. I'm sure they would love to get John Harbaugh. If I'm John Harbaugh, no state income tax, a lot of sun. And, if anybody can make Miami a tough team, and we just talked about tough defense, complementary football, great running offense, that's a John Harbaugh team.
Got to get a quarterback, though. It looks like they're going to move off Tua. He's very expensive, and he's not there anymore. Everything that has come out is he makes it to his first read and then he flails. And as somebody who owned Jalen Waddle in fantasy this year and watched a lot of Miami games under duress, I can contest how quickly he got the ball out to absolutely no one time and time again. So it'll be interesting where they go for that. Again, I think Mac Jones, Malik Willis are two potential backups that are probably going to be day one starters somewhere. They may not hold the job for 17 games next year, but I would expect both of them to have starting roles somewhere. And Miami might be that spot under John Harbaugh or whoever takes that over.
Could be. All right, I'm going to make a prediction. My prediction is that Matt LaFleur is going to be the coach of the Raiders next year. And my second prediction is that the Raiders will have the same lack of identity as Matt LaFleur's Packers this year.
Bold. So you think LaFleur is going to get let go or traded, because he could get traded, which is very rare. And we'll talk about some of the coach trade implications in a minute. But I have a hard time thinking that Matt LaFleur should stick around. I know there's been a lot of talk on extending him past 2026, and the Packers are looking at that, and they want to get him, extended before we get to the end of the year and all of those types of things. But he just had one of the most catastrophic meltdowns in the playoffs that I can remember since 28-3. And you can point to, all the injuries and how much of a ragtag team this was. But no, he had an 18-point lead. He had a huge lead in the second half. He built that somehow, and then he just got out-coached. And he couldn't move the ball in the second half except for that last touchdown to Golden in the fourth quarter. So it's hard for me to look at that and think, yeah, this is a guy that we should extend and pay a lot of money to extend.
So you hit on what I was going to say. The Raiders have 10 draft picks.
And $100 million.
It's a lot. Well, the $100 million is for players. And if what you're saying is they don't necessarily need to fill up the team with 10 draft picks because they can spend $100 million on players, then yeah, I agree with you. But my thing is, I could totally see them making a trade for LaFleur. We've seen this happen a couple times in the past. And I think they would want somebody established to come in and guide this thing forward. Right now, when you look at the names that are out there, none of them are inspiring. And if it's not him, I could see it being Robert Saleh after, he obviously did okay things with the Jets. Then he left the Jets and the Jets got a lot worse. That makes him look good in retrospect. And what he's done with San Francisco generally has been good. Although you look at their run defense right now, it's not good. The defense is not that good right now. But, suffered a lot of injuries. I don't know. I just have this weird feeling like the Raiders are going to do something different and out of the box.
They have to. And, you look at how Mark Davis has run the team historically, and it's been very uninspiring, but he has Tom Brady to rely on and credibility there and another brain to pick. And I think that makes a huge difference. And I could see that. I could see a swing for the fences trade before you potentially blow it up and trade away Crosby. I mean, you're going to have Fernando Mendoza, Ashton Gianti, Brock Bowers. You have defensive cornerstones in Crosby. You have the makings of something great. And Pete Carroll just was not it. And neither was Chip Kelly. And he was the highest paid offensive coordinator in the league this year. It could have been better if you had somebody young with a fresh mind to come in and attack this thing. If they had gotten Mike McDonald instead of the Seahawks 2 years ago, what this Raiders team, could have morphed into by now, especially because you're looking at the Kansas City Chiefs and we've talked about them in the past. I personally think that they'll bounce back, but could they be on a downward slide if Travis Kelce's gone and they can't figure out the wide receiving options? And now's the time for the Raiders to take a swing with all of their young talent, especially looking at the Chargers still haven't figured it out. So I don't know, that division could be open for the taking. And
that's fair.
That's when you make moves.
All right. So John, where do you think John Harbaugh is going to land? If you were to predict it right now, where do you think he's going to land? And then is there anything else going on in the coaching carousel that is of particular interest to you?
I mean, I think he should go to the Raiders. I think that is the most alluring job. I think Fernando Mendoza is the truth. I think he's going to do very well. He prepares like a mofo. And that is, again, we talk about the draft picks, we talk about the cap space. Like if I'm John Harbaugh and I'm looking at where I want to go and have an immediate impact and then, have fun, it would be the Raiders. I have a hard time thinking there are other roles or other coaching vacancies that are more alluring than that, unless he doesn't believe in Fernando Mendoza. That would be the only thing. Because there isn't another quarterback in this draft class that is really exciting.
I think the power of lifestyle and the absence of state income tax is a powerful thing. And I think that he's going to end up in Miami. That's my gut. And I think that he is going to make Miami tough again, and he is going to make the AFC East as competitive as the NFC West is right now. But it's going to be interesting to see where everybody lands. There's going to be a lot of retread coaches out there, a lot of retread coordinators that have had shots in the past. And I don't mean to say that, negatively. A lot of times you have to go through that fire the first time. We talk about this with playoff teams and playoff quarterbacks, that it's hard to win a Super Bowl until you've gone through the playoffs at least once and suffered a tough loss and had to really lick your wounds and come back again. I think it's the same thing here with a coach. Very few coaches end up being tremendously successful at their first stop. So a lot of names that we've seen before, a number of them are going to end up in new places, and it's going to be very interesting to see how that changes the fortunes of each of these franchises.
Now, I have two questions for you.
Yeah.
Do you remember a time where over a quarter of the league had head coaching vacancies? Because I can't.
I don't. I really don't. The norm felt like 4 or 5 in a year. There are probably a couple of years where there's been 6, but we have 9 right now. That's insane.
Absolutely absurd. And the crazier part is, I guess by definition, 2 of them would be because the Steelers let go of Tomlin, or Tomlin retired, chose to walk away, and that's my second question. That's the only division that actually shares 2 head coaching vacancies. Which is just kind of wild. Just weird how statistics map out like that. But then I guess it also makes sense that it's the last place team in every single division fired their head coach. Now
everybody ends up last. They've got to make some change.
Now I do want to ask too. We bring up Mike Tomlin, the Steelers, since he mutually agreed to step down, still own his rights, I believe, for 2 more years on his contract. So if he were to want to come back coaching again, they would be able to trade him and actually get capital for that. Just like Sean Payton and the Saints the Saints traded Payton to Denver and then got capital for him to unretire and then do what he's doing in Denver. How many years do you think it'll take for Tomlin to get traded and then potentially come back? Do you think he's going to do media for a year?
Traded. I think they'll just release his rights. At some point, they'll just release his rights. I don't know what the implications are of doing that right now versus doing that down the road, but they were going to let him go anyways. Everybody knew that. He lost 7 straight playoff games. 7 straight playoff games.
His last playoff win was during the Obama administration.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, they're not going to hold that over his head and then say, oh, we somehow convinced you to walk away for pride or whatever. I mean, coaches get fired all the time. It's not like he loses face by them saying, we fired him because he lost 7 straight playoff games. So no, I don't think that they will trade his rights. I think that if he wants to come back, they'll either just transfer his rights and they'll get no compensation out of it whatsoever, or they will just release his rights entirely.
All
right, John, let's talk about these divisional games because we have 4 huge games on the docket, and I am so curious to know which game you think is most likely to be an upset. Is it now the Bills 1.5 point underdogs at the Broncos. That spread has flipped officially since it opened. Is it the 49ers, 7-point underdogs at Seattle? Fred Warner sounds like he may be back, but George Kittle won't. Is it the Texans, who were 3.5-point underdogs not even an hour ago? Line is moved to New England -3, so a clean 3 in favor of New England. Or is it the home Bears, who are 3.5-point underdogs to the Los Angeles Rams? What upset is most likely going to happen, in your opinion?
Give me the Texans. I don't care about the cold weather. This defense is nasty, and they are going to make Drake May's life a living hell. You look at what they did to Aaron Rodgers. You look at what they've done to good teams, Josh Allen in the regular season, and I just have a really tough time thinking that the Pats are even going to get to 17 in this game. It's going to be a rock fight, and CJ Stroud has to take care of the ball. He has to play clean football, and that offense has to move the ball a little bit. And look, I thought Justin Herbert would not get the shit kicked out of him for 60 minutes, and he would actually have a chance to go through his progression. I was wrong. No, the Patriots brought it for 60 minutes, and Herbert had nothing. And maybe these words will come to haunt me.
Losing Christian Gonzalez in the process, though.
That's fair, and that should help CJ Stroud and that secondary. But Woody Marks has not lit the world on fire. Neither is Nick Chubb. They are sorely missing Joe Mixon right now, who could really be that dynamic running back. And I believe they also lost Nico Collins to a pretty nasty concussion. They played Monday night. This game is Sunday, so it's a short week for them. So Nico likely will not play in this game. And that's going to be a tough road to hoe. Tough road to hoe. But if they can move the ball with Jaden Higgins and keep things rolling and get enough points on the board and maybe get a defensive score, I think the Texans are my pick to get that upset. The kind of runner-up, the Bills are favored by 1.5. So are we saying that the Broncos...
they're not favored by 1.5 anymore. They opened favored by 1.5, and the line is flipped to Broncos -1.5. The Bills are technically the underdog.
Okay. That seems more right. My pick is going to be the Texans. What about you?
I'm going to go with the Bears. I think that this Bears team has an identity. Unfortunately, part of that identity has been coming back from big holes that they've dug for themselves. But I think that they still have a little bit of magic left. I think there is a high amount of disrespect in the 3.5-point line favoring the Rams, who had to pull one out of the hat against Carolina in Carolina. The total for this game is 48.5 points. It's the highest total of all 4 games. So Vegas expects this to be relatively high scoring, and I think in a high scoring game, anybody can win it. I think this will come down to the last possession. And if we've learned anything, the Bears tend to win games that come down to the last possession. Now, hopefully they're not going to dive into a 21-point hole before they start climbing back. But yeah, I think the Bears at home, a raucous Soldier Field. I think that is going to be the upset of the week. It's going to be cold. Yeah.
It's going to be like 8 degrees with wind chill. Matt Stafford he didn't look right in that game against Carolina. He had a handful of passes that were just so off target. It was really uncharacteristic. And if his finger is it's not there, then yeah, that's going to be a struggle. Roma Dunze came back and he looked really good for the Bears. But you're right. I think they need to play a clean 4 quarters of football. I don't see McVay having a repeat of that Thursday night Seattle game and blowing another huge lead. But yeah, it's the Bears defense they're going to have to get actual turnovers this time. It's amazing that they won that game against Green Bay without a turnover after being, the league leader in takeaways. But that's going to be the difference maker.
Okay, so you're on Houston +3. Are you on the Bears +3.5 at home?
No, I can't do that. I have to go with the Rams. I have to
Okay.
believe in Puka and Kyron Williams and everything that they've done. And I look at, what the Niners team did to the Bears, and I recognize that this isn't Soldier Field. And I know I said this last week, but this could be, the last Bears game, the last Bears playoff game in Soldier Field. You never know. And they'll be roaring to run. But yeah.
All right, well, I've got the Bears. Let's talk about the Bills and the Broncos. That's actually going to kick off the slate on Saturday at 1:30 Pacific time. Again, the Broncos 1.5-point favorites. To me, this is a question of, does Bo Nix show up, and can he score on the Bills' slightly above average defense? Because if he can, I think the Broncos can do enough to keep Josh Allen from putting on the cape and going full Super Allen. What do you think?
I tend to agree, but this Bills defense last week against the Jags showed up in a big way and kind of shut down that passing attack like we had seen. And hey, if Trevor Lawrence and that stable of wide receivers couldn't get it going, if the Bills bring the same level of intensity and the same level of game planning, I have a hard time thinking Bo Nix, who is a marked step down from Trevor Lawrence, is going to be able to do much more. Now, the other side of the ball, we mentioned Josh Allen and putting on his cape, but they only have 3 healthy wide receivers on their entire roster. They lost Gabe Davis and Shavers, 2 knee injuries, both ACL tears, I believe, and so they legitimately are going to have to pull Mecole Hardman from the practice squad. They're going to have to look to the street just for some kind of depth because they can only run a max of 3 wideout sets, and they're going to have to really use their 2 tight end sets to make something happen. And James Cook, you better show up in a big way and be ready to catch some balls because it's either that or a lot of design runs from Josh Allen.
Well, I was going to say James Cook didn't have a good day against Jacksonville, and Josh still put the cape on. And I would say that, Trevor didn't play very well, and that offense didn't look very good. I don't know how much of it was Buffalo's defense looking amazing. I didn't think it was necessarily that. I thought the Jaguars' offense looked slow, and they didn't run the ball enough. But, I tend to think that in this one, Bo Nix is going to be ready to go. And I think that Sean Payton offense is tried and true in the playoffs. He's been there a bunch of times. He knows the scheme that works. And so I'm liking the Broncos in this one, -1.5.
I think that defense is for real. And I love the Bills. I love Josh Allen. I just don't think that magic is going to last for the full postseason this year. And I think this is where they're going to come to a head. They're going to be asking a lot of Josh Allen at altitude, running and throwing, and I expect that offense to be on the field a lot. And so I think the Broncos are going to take this one and advance and host the first AFC championship since Peyton was in town.
Yep. Of all the games on the board, that's the one that's probably going to draw most of my money for this weekend. All right. Let's talk about the game that we both care about the most. 49ers at the Seahawks on Saturday night. It's Seahawks -7. We all know the situation. Trent Williams will play. George Kittle will not play. Ricky Pearsall might play. Fred Warner might play. And from there, it's 2 teams that know each other really well. With the question marks in place, who would you back right now?
How can I not back the Seahawks? And I know that is, obvious because of personal bias, because they're huge favorites. But Mike McDonald has this defense clicking in a way that we haven't seen in Seattle in years. You have the actual organization clamping down on resellers to keep it from being a huge contingent of red in that stadium. That Lumen Field is going to be blue and green, and it is going to be loud. It's Saturday night. This is a marquee event. And Sam Darnold has done well against this defense. Chris Shula scares me, but not as much Robert Saleh based on how the last couple games have gone. That being said, Brock Purdy's 4-0 in Lumen Field. Sorry, I keep wanting to call it Quest and then CenturyLink, but it's Lumen Field now. And so there is a little element of history there that keeps me up a little bit, and 7 points is a lot.
Yeah.
But I can't not pick the Seahawks considering everything they have going for them. And I do think George Kittle is a huge, huge loss for their running game and their passing game.
I agree with that. I agree with everything you said. But if I have to pick this game, I'm going to pick it San Francisco +7 because it's just too many points. These are two teams that know each other too well. You know, Shanahan is a hard coach to beat multiple times in a short window, and he is incredibly clever. What they just did to get past the Eagles was incredibly impressive. I think 7 points is too many points. I expect this is going to be a field goal game that comes down to the final possession. So, wow, I'm not going to bet San Francisco +7. If I was going to bet this game, that's where I would go with it.
That's fair.
Anything else that you're going to be monitoring this weekend or anything else that you want to talk about before we break?
No, man, I'm just excited for football. Do we want to talk Monday's game? Do we want to talk Indiana and Miami?
I mean, I don't really think there's a whole lot to talk about. I think it's going to be an Indiana steamrolling. I've talked about this, written about this. I picked Indiana last week to beat Oregon handily, and I just think that they are a generational team. I think that this Indiana 16-0 season, first ever 16-0 season, if they get it done, is going to go down as one of the 5 greatest football campaigns in the history of this sport. And I think that Miami is not ready for what Indiana's bringing to the table. I can appreciate that Miami played a clean game against Ohio State, didn't have any penalties, was able to, control Ohio State on the ground. And that forced Ohio State to throw the ball more often than they like and not really take shots at their own discretion. That didn't work out so well. But Indiana is not Ohio State. When I think about the matchups, them trying to stop Roman Hemby and Kalen Black, the receiving trio of Omar Cooper Jr. and Elijah Surratt and Charlie Becker, and then of course, the quarterback at the helm of all of it, Fernando Mendoza, is cool, calm, collected. And I think that, Curt Cignetti really does have these guys play one snap at a time, and they're not looking at the scoreboard. And I think if they play efficient football and they play downhill, Miami isn't going to be up. Miami, I don't think Miami was as good as Oregon was. And we just saw what they did to Oregon. Now, they may not explode like that 2 weeks in a row. That's hard to do. But I do think that they're going to beat Miami by double digits.
I mean, they put 38 up on Alabama, so it'd actually be 3 weeks in a row.
3 weeks in a row.
Minimum of $4,000 to get in the gates.
Yeah, and that's going to be 90% Crimson, 93% Crimson. That Indiana fan base, they dominated the Rose Bowl. Then they went to Georgia and they dominated the Peach Bowl. And look, if we know anything about Miami, the Dolphins have struggled to fill the stadium when they haven't been great. The Hurricanes, even when they've been really good, have struggled to fill the stadium. It's a hometown game. It's hard for people, I think, to justify shelling out those prices. Harder than if you're from Indiana and you're already flying to Miami and you're investing in flights and hotels and all cars and all those things. Then it's like the ticket is just one part of the package. I think it's going to be overwhelmingly Indiana in that stadium. And I think that's the funniest storyline of all, is that Miami earned the right to play a home national championship game, and it's not going to feel like that in any way, shape, or form.
If you're a Miami fan looking at the cost of the ticket, there has to be some part of your mind of like, do I really want to pay two months of mortgage to just go watch my team's shit get pushed in? And that's going to be a no.
Well, and I think those prices will come down. Like, we've seen this storyline before where these record prices are announced right when the game is set and people go rush to secure their tickets. But then you know how it is. There's always tickets the day of. Although I do remember the Oregon-Auburn National Championship. Tickets were still going for like $2,000 day of.
I mean, you had so many Auburn fans that were there to just tailgate. They had no intention of going to the game. They just
At
wanted
all.
to tailgate at the national championship game, and they kept those prices high
Yeah,
just in case.
they sure did. They sure did. So yeah, I think it's going to be Indiana by a landslide. I hope it is. I hope they put the finishing touches on this thing and we get to look back and say, hey, I remember the year when Indiana entered the season as the losingest program in college football history and then went on to have the greatest year in modern college football entirely.
With 3-star recruits.
Yeah.
No 5 stars.
Yeah. That legend, Kurt Signetti, the legend began really at Indiana. Like the people who knew at James Madison, and before James Madison, I think he was at Elon. But I mean, what he's done at Indiana is going to be remembered forever.
Where do you think he goes next?
The NFL. I don't think there's another college program that would give him any satisfaction. He's going to they will pay him whatever he needs. They will give him whatever he wants in terms of resources and support. Why go somewhere else? He took the losingest program in the history of the sport and has made it the pinnacle of the sport. Like, you don't even write books about that. You don't even write fictional stories about that because it just can't happen. And yet he's done it. And he will put the finishing touches on it with this national title.
Can't wait. Should be a great game.
Let's go. All right, man. Hey, thank you as always for the time. And let's get together again soon. In the meantime, I hope everybody has a bunch of fun and enjoys all the football to come over the next few days.
Can't wait.
Cheers.